What we've been studying over the last several weeks, actually it's the third time, is studying Kaivalya Upanishad. And it's a part of Atharvaveda, again, primarily written by Atharvana. But in this case, the main characters are Ashwalayan, and the teacher is Brahmadev. Now, this young Ashwalayan, later on he went on to add a certain section to Rigveda as well. He approaches Lord Brahmaji and prays to him that he be granted Brahmadhyan. Now remember, Ashwalayan, when he approaches Brahmadev, he was not an average individual, but he was a scholar on his own behalf, on his own standing. And he approached him with great degree of humility, amanitvam, great degree of devotion, bhakti, approach him with great reverence to Brahmaji, and his willingness to serve Brahmadev to make sure he gets all the education from him. Again, as I mentioned to him, he had prepared himself with antaranga and bahiranga preparation. That means he had mastered sadhana chatushtaya. That means he had vivek, discrimination between what is shreyas and what is preyas, what is permanent and what is transient, which is real and unreal. He had vairagya, dispassion. Again, we have emphasized in the past, it does not necessarily mean sannyasa by putting on the saffron robe, but an attitude of detachment. So both of you can be, we can be sannyasi as well as samsari. Mumukshutvam, the intense desire to gain the knowledge. That's the reason why he approached Brahmadev. And he also had mastered the Shat Sampati. And to quickly look at it, it means Shama, that means control of mind, Dhamma, control of sense control, Uparava, that means being dutiful, Titiksha means forbearance, Shraddha means total faith and Shraddha into Guru and the scriptures, and Samadhan, that is contentment. And this is all were there for the purpose of purity of mind and purity, focusing of the mind, Chitta Shuddhi and Chitta Ekagrata. He had come prepared with this particular background, and then he approaches Brahmadev, requesting him to teach him the Brahmadhyan, and he respectfully says to him, Adhihi Bhagwan Varishtham Sada Sadbhi Nigudham Sevimanam Yaya Achirat Sarva Papam Vyapoya Parat Param Vidvam Purusham Yati. That means he was saying, I pray to, please teach me, Adhi. Teach me what? Brahma Vidya, the highest knowledge of Brahman, which Sadbhi, with the wise people, with spiritual hunger, always sought, and that's called highest secret. And highest secret does not mean it was hidden somewhere else, because not too many knew it. And again, this knowledge was given not based upon sex, boys or the girls, men or women, not related to race, not related to lineage, or not related to skin color. Does not matter what caste one comes from. It doesn't matter whether it comes is rich or poor. It was available for anybody who had prepared himself to gain that knowledge. And he said that by gaining this knowledge, I'll be able to reach the ultimate state, the Parat Param. All these wise people go, and that's what they ask. Please, please, please teach me that. It was the opening words that when he approached it respectfully, he requested Brahmadev. And like a good teacher, He looked at him, recognized that indeed the student appeared to be ready. So basically he said, Tasmai Pitamaha Uvacha Shraddha Bhakti Dhyana Yogat Avai. May you know that Brahmajnan through Shraddha, Bhakti, and Dhyana. That means you may know that Brahmajnan through total trust in the teachings of the Guru and Shastra, Shraddha. But remember, we have emphasized it several times. This Shraddha here in Vedas is very viable because one is able to have a self-experience, Anubhava. So it's very viable Shraddha. Through Bhakti, that means an intense commitment and earnestness to learn that Brahmanya. So failure is not an option. So intense Bhakti. And of course, the last but not the least is through meditation, culmination of three basic steps of Shravana, Manana, Nidhyasana, and that leading ultimately to knowledge. So basically, he outlined the methodology to achieve that Brahmajnan through Shraddha, Bhakti, and Dhyana. I didn't say I'll give it to you. May you achieve that through this process. Because the teacher can take you. It's our responsibility as disciples of the students to personally experience it and get to know it. Make a second part of it. And finally, during the last week, we learned and spent a great deal of time. We said, na karmana, na prajaya, dhanena, or na dhanena, that means, tyagena eke, amrutatvam anashu. And where is amrutatvam? Parena nakam. Parena nakam is better than heaven. Nitam guhayam bibrajate. Yat yatayaha vishanti. So that is what we basically studied during the last week. Just to refresh you on that particular teaching, I'm going to spend a couple of extra minutes before we undertake today's verse. To repeat the meaning of it, Eke amrutatvam anashu. If you have attained immortality. And how do you say? Na karmana, na prajaya, na dhanena. Not by doing efforts, karma, not by having progeny, a big family retinue, and not by amassing the wealth, dhanena, but have attained that immortality by an enunciation alone. Eke tyagena eke, amrutatvam manashu. And where was the amrutatvam? That amrutatvam guhayam nitam, which is kept in the cave of the heart where it bibrajate, which shines brilliantly. And those people who are trying, yataya, yati, the plural of the yataya, vishanti, the strivers enter into that cave where this amrutatvam is shining brilliantly. And that is so wonderful. Parena nakam, it transcends the pleasures of heaven and is constantly shining brilliantly. Yat bibrajate. Again, when he said na karmana, that means basically by doing activities which pertaining to our stage in our life and performing rituals, regular prayers at different stages in our life, those will certainly amass a certain amount of merit and will even take us to a high level of swarga, heaven, for a certain period of time. Because as Shri Krishna says in the 21st verse of 9th chapter, he said, Kshedena punyena martyalokam vishanti. So as soon as your traveler's checks are over, all your merits have been consumed in heaven, you return back to Martyalokam vision. Even if you do the activities in the form of karma yoga, Ishvara Arpan Buddhi, when you're doing, that means karma yoga, karma phala tyaga, karma phala sannyasa, that person will be ready to gain the knowledge. The karma yoga takes you a certain stage of understanding, but not the final step. No prajaya, by having children, having a large family, is supportive of you, and perform various rituals during the lifetime, after you're gone with Shraddha and other ceremonies, can extend your stay in heaven, but it's not a permanent stay. And certainly, dhanena, you cannot get that age. Kamini, Kanchan, and Kirti, all these things can achieve a certain amount of success or happiness, but it's not that happiness which is brilliantly shining in the cave of your heart, that Amrutatvam. If you remember the story of Vishwarath, as Prasanna has told many times, King Vishwarath had to become Vishwamitra with the blessing of Vashishta, his teacher then, Guru, to gain that grace before he was able to become Vishwamitra, and then he was able to get that Brahmadhya. And the only answer he said, no prajaya, no dhanena, no karmena, tyagena eke, only by tyaga. And then, what do you mean a tyaga we talked about? The tyag means, Sri Krishna had mentioned in the third verse of the third chapter, Lokesmin vividadishta, maya prokta mayadaga, jnana yogena sankhyana, karma yogena yogina. That means karma yogena. We, all of us, are samsaris. For us is karma yoga. For few are sannyasis, jnana yoga. Again, when we talking about samsaris as we are, we have to make sure that we have an understanding where we get away from ego and a sense of ownership. That means we have to get away from ahankar and mamaka. Me and maza, these things you have to give up. Ahankar and mamaka. You have to develop vairagya in a sense by viveka. That means knowing what is enjoyable, pleasant, or what is good in the long term. Shreyas, that's what exactly the 7th verse of the 2nd chapter, Arjuna asked you, Shreyas te, tell me that. What is Shreyas for me? I'm your student. And once you start getting the taste of this improvement in your character, as you have to continue to advance it, at the same time not lose it. So satsangatve, nitsangatvam, nitsangatve, nischalatat, nirmohatvam, nirmohatte, nichalatve, jivan mukti, bhajavan. So you have to stay in the company of good people, like we do continuing medical education for all different professions. Remember, Shri Krishna remember that if you want to accomplish those goals, we learned last time, always remember God in every activity you do, and offer all the good activities you perform to God. Tasmat sarveshu kaleshu mamad nuswara dirjacha mayarpita manobuddhir mame vaishyashi samshaya. Therefore, remember me all times and continue activities with mind and intellect absorbed in me. You shall undoubtedly come to me. And those who surrender mamakarana ahankar, then they ananyas chintayo mam, ye janam paryupasate, tesham nityavayuktanam, yogakshemam vahamya. That means to those men who worship me alone, Shri Krishna is telling Arjuna, think of nobody else. To those self-controlled individuals, I secure for them that which is not already, whatever they have, I'll protect it, Shema. Whatever they do not have, I'll pass it on to them, yoga. So yoga kshemam vahanyam. And we also learn that is Amrutatvam is Parenanakam, superior to heaven, because it is constant, present, and does not run out anytime. So when you understand that, it is like a crystallized happiness which remains permanently as your own inner character. So just as we will say, rose is fragrant, sun is shining, fire is hot. When you have that, we say, I'm happy. Now, we talked about Amrutatvam. In a sense, it is referring to immortality, freedom from death. But that's only one of the three important aspects. That is freedom from death, yes. But freedom from sorrows, ananda, freedom from sorrows, and freedom from ignorance, chit. So Amrutatvam includes Sat Chit Anand, freedom from death, immortality, freedom from pain or discomfort or sorrows, ananda, and freedom from ignorance and chit. And that's what exactly in Brihadaranyaka Upanishad we learn. Asvatoma sadgamaya, tamosoma jyotirgamaya, mrutyorma amrutam gamaya. And that's what basically we learned in the last session that we had. And now we finally come to today's discussion, which is an important verse, something that you should refer to in your life. And it goes like this. Vedanta Vijnana Sunishchyartha Sannyasa Yogat Yataya Shuddha Sattva Te Brahma Lokeshu Paranta Kale Paramrita Parimuchyanti Sarve. Now, these are important words, so we'll take one by one, and of course, we'll have enough time at the end. He's talking about Yatayaha Shuddha Sattvaha, pure-minded strivers. Yataya. Yatihi is basically one who is trying, one who is striving. And the plural of that is pure-minded strivers, are Shuddha Sattvaha Yataya. Sannyasa Yogat Vedanta Vidyana Sunishchayartha. Sannyasa Yogat Vedanta Vijnana Sunishchayartha. Those with a well-ascertained knowledge or understanding that Atman is essential, understanding of Atman is essential wisdom of Vedanta that comes about due to practice of sannyasa. Sannyasa means detachment. So they understand that a certain knowledge, that understanding that Atman as the essential wisdom of Vedanta through their careful practice of sannyasa or detachment. So they have full understanding of that. And those, te parantakale brahmalokeshu parimuchyanti. They all are liberated and gain the abode of Brahman as the body falls for the last time. Parantakale. That means this is a culmination of wisdom of Vedas, called Vedanta, is Upanishad, essence of Vedas. It prepares the yati for knowledge, a correct understanding or identification of self by negating the false identification of mana, buddhi, chitta, ahankara. Mind and body adds something important because teaches us is important, but is transient and not real because not permanent. And even the ego itself, ahankara, is not the self. Of course, ahankara is a imposter of atma. Aham, self, we call it ahankar, is not an atma. And once we are able to get that understanding to full understanding of Vedanta, understanding the meaning of Atma, then a person is able to reach that state and he's able to stay in the Brahmaloka at the time of death. We talk about Sarve Yataya. All those with such clear and full understanding. Because if you take your time to learn about Vedanta, Upanishads, and experience it through Anubhav, we'll talk about it towards the end, that striver does not fail. As far as I'm concerned, once you experience it, you'll always recognize failure is not an option. Yati, the one who strives, Yataya, the strivers. Sarve Yataya. They are able to be Brahma Lokesh. Now, Brahmalok is, there's no plural to that. There's only one Brahmalok. This is Paradise Valley, has only one zip code, only one Brahmalok. We talk about Bhuhu, Bhuha, Swa, earth, celestial space, and heaven. In Narayana Upanishad, it goes even 7 steps. Om Bhuhu, Om Bhuha, Om Swa, Om Maha, Om Jana, Om Tapa, Om Satyam. Even these 7 steps are not Brahmalok. Brahmalok is independent of it, all above it, and only one single place exists. Brahmaiva Loka is only Brahmalok is one. In this, it is that Brahmalok is Sat, existence absolute, and that is reflecting in the heart of each and every one of us, but we don't know it. And is experienced at Chit, the awareness in which the universe exists and shines. So in our ignorance, we tend to divide Sat from Chit. Sat is existence and Chit is awareness. The truth is that existence is not different from awareness. The existence that shines as the knowing, existence absolute, is hidden by names and form, Namarupa. That is, Sat is called mystery of knower, Chit is mystery of knower. What really appears is knowledge. And Sat and Chit become united in Brahman, which is Atma. I know I'm going to come back to it again, so bear with me for a while. We talked about Vividisha Sannyas, that means renunciation for pursuit of knowledge. Now, for example, sannyas is taken with saffron robes, and you go through the certain ceremony, you become a renunciate. But we, as samsaris, can continue our steps in our life and take Vividisha sannyas. That is called attitude of detachment. You can call it renunciation. for pursuit of knowledge. So it is a vyavasayitma buddhi, that means intellectual desire to gain that ascertained knowledge. What we're studying here for several weeks here is a pursuit of knowledge, of several months, several years for that matter, is get that ascertained knowledge, which is given, described, detailed in Upanishads, and we have to experience it. Vividisha Sannyas, to define is the intellectual desire to acquire a certain knowledge. One discards all other goals, but there's intense desire to acquire that ascertained knowledge as we continue our usual activities based upon the stage in our life. So we go through Shravana, Manana, Nididhasana, all that is absolutely must. We can continue to do our usual puja and japa. We can continue through the study of scriptures, the Sanskrit warrior. But what happens in the Parantakala? Once you reach it, why is it called Parantakala? Parantakala. That means death once and for all, because that person is never to be born again. Desire, if you have it, that means there is some need you desire to accomplish to fulfill that need. Desires will be there as long as we feel incomplete or inadequate. So for those individuals who have not reached the enlightened state and feel incomplete in their life, the death is followed by rebirth. Mrityoho mrityum apnoti. Rudaranushan talks about in 4:4:19. So that is, the death is followed by rebirth. For the enlightened individual, death has taken place in the wake of the knowledge. That means the person, while alive, as a videha mukti, the death is one's ego, a death of the sense of individuality. And such individuals are called paramritaha. That means those who gain identity with Brahman. And when they die, when they discard this physical body, they're parantakale. At the time of the physical death, at that time, all the bodies, the physical body as you see it, the subtle body as we have it, the current Shari does not have to come back, becomes Atman, and that becomes ultimate death for them, because there is no reason for them to be born again. Now, let me go back again. I know it's a very complex subject, but I'm going to spend as much time explaining and then open up for questions. Vedanta Vidyana Sudishchiyartha. I'm sure everybody had a question about it. Those with a certain knowledge of Vedas, Vedanta Vijnana, a certain knowledge of Vedas, Sunishchayata, that means they have that full understanding of that ascertained knowledge of Vedas. They have developed a full understanding of that topic. As a matter of fact, as early as the second chapter, Prasanna, in the 41st verse, Shri Krishna says, Vyavasayitva Vayasayatmika Buddhi Ekeha Kuru Nandana Bahushakha Yanantascha Buddhayo Vyavasayira. Shri Krishna said, Arjuna, with reference to this state of enlightenment, moksha, Arjuna, there is a single, well-asserted understanding. Ekeha Kurunanda. The notion of those who lack discrimination are many branch and innumerable indeed. Vyasayatma buddhi ekeha Kurunandana. But Bahushaka hi anantascha buddhayoho avyavasayina. Those people who have a certain knowledge have one clear-cut understanding those who lack the discrimination are many branch and innumerable things. So a couple of ways we can approach it. Individual like us who are samsaris, how you go about doing it. So Vedanta Pramana is, Vedanta is the Praman, is a means of knowledge. Now Vijnana is Vishesham Jnanam Iti Vijnanam, a particular or unique knowledge revealed by Upanishads of Vedanta is Vishesha Jnanam Vijnana. Now Vedanta is the Praman to understand what Atman is. For example, eyes are Praman, a valid means of knowledge to perceive colors and forms, Namarup. Whereas Vedanta pramans validness of the knowledge of knowing self, which cannot be known by any other means of knowledge. We have organs of perception to perceive objects in the world. But self or Atman is not an object. Self is the subject, perhaps the only subject. It cannot be perceived by our sense organs. But we recognize as appropriate sense organs to the process of inference, presumption, comparison. I want to go into that subject at the present time. But that's how we use different body organs are able to recognize particular objects. I am aware of the fact that I exist and I exist. I exist and I'm unconscious. So you have to understand through full understanding of Upanishads. Aham asmi, aham bhami, kadachit naham apriya. That means I aware in the fact that I exist, I'm conscious, and always like myself. Kadachit naham apriya. I never dislike myself. That's how the Sanskrit word goes there. The Vedanta Upanishads are needed to teach me that I am non-dual, that I am Brahman, I am limitless. And to get that knowledge, I need Vedanta Upanishad. The standard technology to learn what we learn in this subjective world of ours, samsara, the praman that we use are not possible to understand Upanishad meaning. So what happens is when you have an understanding of meaning of Upanishad, it becomes a praptasya prapti. The individual recognizes that whatever he was seeking was already there. He's like finding the 10th man and the enlightened teacher telling him that you are the 10th man. Individual described here is the one who's already accomplished that particular goal. The key is to overcome our ignorance, false identification of ours in the form of being mana, buddhi, chitta, ahankara. That is to be discarded, recognizing that it is not permanent. We have to overcome it to getting the personal experience of Atman. The lantern of ours, you grew up as a youngster with kerosene lantern. After a little while, there will be a black soot covering the inside of that glass. And that's the ignorance that we have. Our responsibility is to make sure that we use careful studies of these Upanishads and step by step clean that black soot and let that brilliant Brahman that is shining brilliantly inside, bhati, inside our heart, cave, that is to shine right through. Now, again, let me go back again. Now, it's a very difficult subject. Jnana and Vijnana. Jnana is objective knowledge. Vijnana is a subjective knowledge. Now objective knowledge, jnana, comes because study of the effects, something that is external to me. It may influence my effect. It will not change my ideas, with my ideas about myself, but basically it's not going to affect me directly. I'm going to learn some scientific knowledge that we do in the lab. It's a paroksha knowledge. It's remote, is separate for me. It's start. That's why you go to college and learn, get additional knowledge. Jnana is that has become a subjective knowledge for myself, which is influence and change me. Vijnana is a study of the cause and subject. It's introspection that changes my ideas of myself. That subjective knowledge is aparoksha, is immediate, personal, realized knowledge. Then I don't have to remember that knowledge, because that knowledge becomes my nature. It becomes subjective knowledge, is to know that indeed I am Brahman. There are no more gaps in the knowledge. There are no doubts about it, because we have a personal experience of swa anubhava. Can only come about the pure mind, self-effort, renunciation. Mind is cleaned of all the attractions and aversions, raga, dvesha. All the negativity that has come about is no longer there. We overcome all kama, krodha, lobha, moha, mada, matsarya. Remove all the false notions of the identity that we have built up in this life, now several past lifetimes. But that only comes about with starting initially with Antaranga and Bahiranga sadhana that I described it early in the session. And again, to emphasize, we can still continue to do the activities that we are doing depending upon the stage of our life. Grihastha, Vanaprastha, doesn't matter. We can continue to do that. And then when you get that personal experience, that's what we talk about is Jivan Mukti or Videha Mukti. So these people who have achieved that state, for them, when they discard the body, that becomes a death once and for all, paranta kale. So Jnani does not become free. Jnani realizes that he was always free. Jnani does not become free, but he realizes he was always free. I'll tell you a story in a diverse way. And the story is there is a disciple who is working in an ashrama, serving his teacher, and he has told him to take care of all the cows. And he takes them in the field so that they can eat the grass, and brings them back. And one day he got back and he ties them, but when he brought back, he realized that one of the cows, the rope was lost in the way. He brought the cow to the stall and was afraid that cow might run away because there was no rope to tie. So he goes to the teacher asking, "What shall I do?" The teacher just smiled. He said, "Don't worry about it. Go take the cow to the stall, make all the motions that you normally do when you tie the rope, and walk away." The Student got up a couple of times during the night, was surprised the cow was still in that place. When he got up in the morning, he started taking the cows to the pasture land. All the cows followed him, except this particular cow. He was surprised. He goes back to teacher again. He said, that cow is not moving. He said, teacher said, don't worry about it. Go again and make a motion as if you're untying that cow. The cow will follow you. Sure enough, we did it, and the cow followed. The story is, we are as much bound as we believe we are bound. The teacher who tells you that you are free is the way to understand it, is that jnani does not become free by understanding the Upanishadic knowledge, but the teaches him to understand so that the student is able to get personal experience, through personal experience, that he recognizes that he was always free. So when these people who are enlightened during their lifetime are paramritaha, they're already in the state of enlightenment. So when they drop their body, they already are gone forever, because they are going to come back any more time. Because what happens with that knowledge, when Mundaka Upanishads in 228, vidyate hridaya granthi, chindate sarva samshaya, shiyante chasya karmani, tasmin dehe paravare. The knots that tie the heart are crushed. Hridaya granthi vidyate. And resolved are all doubts and misgivings, and all karmas are dissolved. Shiyante chasya karmani tasmin dehe paravare. So all the knots that were tied to that cow, this get destroyed by understanding and experiencing what we are talking about. I briefly mentioned about Jivan Mukta, Jivanta Eva Brahma Mukta. Basically, Shankaracharya's Mundak Bhashya talking about Jivanta Eva Brahma Bhuta. That means they are Brahman even while living as human beings. Death does not have to intervene between bondage as human being with misunderstanding or incomplete understanding and liberation. In the context of self-realization, there is no persona anymore. The persona, which is the product of sense of isolation, has merged already in this living state in the impersonal reality, which is Brahman. And from the point of onlookers, there seems to be a person, as the body and mind is engaging in any action. But he is impersonal person, Brahman, is Jivan Mukta. For example, if you remember the picture of Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, he was a Jivan Mukta. He was a limitless reality. For such an individual as Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, he's aware of the body in action, but is not body. Let me repeat. Ramakrishna Paramahamsa was aware of his body in action, but he was not his body, even while still dwelling in the body, because his understanding, he has already transcended it. And parimuchanti, that means get liberated. A person is an isolated ego in a separate body. Mind is a meeting pot of matter and spirit. Mind is a meeting pot of finite and infinite, meeting point of mortal and immortal. The ego is the product of wrong identification with the mortal and finite form made up of matter. Prithvi, Aap, Tejo, Vayu, Akash, Tej in between. Eventually, ego is enlightened when it becomes conscious of both the mortal and immortal infinite life and becomes Sagun Brahman, Brahman with attributes. And eventually, the ego resolves into attributeless Brahman, becomes Nirguna. That state, following personal experience, is the state of enlightenment. And Parantakale, Parantaka, final death, there is no rebirth. All the three bodies I described earlier, Sthul, Sukshma, and Karana, the gross, subtle, and causal, all are discarded. The person is enlightened completely. I'll stop at this stage. I know it's a overwhelming subject to discuss in one session, but I'll open up for question as much as I can. Thank you.
Good morning, Dr. Sane. It's Martin. I appreciate the cowherder story. It is still a bit challenging to get rid of humble doubts and misgivings, ignoring feedback, because it might tend to lead towards arrogance or pious, callous lack of compassion. Compassion is the ability to recognize the suffering of others that seems to suggest some consciousness and response to external realities. Can you speak to that at all?
Oh, sure. I'm glad you asked the question. Number one, very happy that you're here to hear that story I promised you.
Yep, thank you.
Two is, don't be hard on yourself. Not having compassion, you're normal. But there is not any individual that you interact with that exists who does not have even the slightest good quality. So if you are able to find out with the tiniest shred of good quality in that individual, be kind to that person. And then you will come to recognize it's much more than that. That your whatever happened in your past interactions that created a negative feeling in your mind, create that attitude. So if you start with one little tiny shred of goodness that you can see, you're able to accomplish and answer your questions. We'll talk about it next time. Thanks.
Shashi, listening to today's talk, I was reminded of Satashiva Brahmendra's, in one of the Upanishad songs he written, Sarvam Brahmamayam, Re Re Sarvam Brahmamayam. Everything is Brahman.
Exactly.
Yeah. I got another comment to make.
Yeah.
Both you and Anantara Panchan, over the years, have taught us the nuances of the Mahavakyas, Tattvamasi, Aham Brahmasmi, Prajnanam Brahma, etc., and urge us to incorporate those teachings in our own lives. Otherwise, it becomes mere Shravana without Manana and Nididhyasana, which would be of some use, but not complete use. And religion, these teachings also have an effect on society, whether we appreciate it or not. And sometimes the laws that are made by the states are influenced by various religious groups. My neighbor keeps on asking me the two hot topics that are going on now in the state. One is with regard to abortion. I don't know anything much about it. Another one is right to life. And they intersect law, medicine, and religion. My neighbor asked me, who's a practicing Catholic, what does Hinduism say about abortion? What does Hinduism say about right to life? I didn't know how to answer that because I haven't given much thought to what the Hindu scriptures say about these things. I only wonder if people who are in the know or who have an ability to understand the nuances of the scripture will come forward and enlighten us on some of these ideas. Because when the legislation is done, enacted, it affects all of us. So we can be silent partners sitting at the sideline, or at least learn what the scriptures have to teach us about these important matters that are in the forefront of the political debate these days. And we're all part of it. We can't step aside from it. Other than that, the topics you have talked about are very good. I just want to make another comment. Professor Palka has given us a new dimension of appreciating the consciousness. He talked about power of music, which was beautiful talk. Then he talked about walking in the nature, looking up at the trees, and suddenly recognizing the oneness of the creation. The same consciousness that pervades you pervades the nature as well. And so that moment of enlightenment was very touching to me. And so his subject is open your eyes, look at nature, you begin to understand you are part of creation as well as the nature is part of creation. So it's your obligation to take care of nature just as it's nature's obligation to take care of you. Very powerful message. So that's where I stop.
Prasanna, thank you very much for important comments. Everybody certainly enjoyed what he said. Three quick comments you primarily made. Make a quick reference to each one of them. You talked about neighbor bothering you about current political issues. The key basically is your your own conscience is the one correct answer for that. But again, remember, they're universal values, and at the same time, they are practical values. What are universal values, absolute values, practical values? You got to remember from that point of view and decide what is appropriate at that particular time. So I'll leave with that. As far as the basic Mahavakyas are concerned, every student of Upanishad goes through various stages of their understanding. You see, when you are going through studies of it, you read, say, Aitara Upanishad, which basically talks about a definition of Brahman, Pradnyanam Brahma. It tries to tell you, yeah, Pradnya, your own consciousness, is Brahman itself. But then you go to school and college, additional education, and you are graduating with a big cap on your head. The teacher is telling you, Upadesha Vakya, Tattvamasi. You are it, my boy. But again, Acharyat Padam Adatte. Only 1/4 is taught you, but he's telling you that Tattvamasi. And then you go through the process as we are doing now. And as we go through Anubhava, then you will have a Trupti Garjana. Aham, oh boy, I am Atma Brahma. That is, oh yeah, I am Brahman. I feel good. Roar of realization. And then as you continue to get the same experience over and over again, the deep meditative state, then we always saying, Aham Brahmasmi. So I use those Mahavakyas at early stages when you're learning, in your educational period when the teacher advises you. Then you have a personal experience. Oh, yes, by George, whatever we are discussing, yes, it is indeed, I am Atma Brahma. And then as you continue through the process of regular meditation, any other questions in the meanwhile?
Dr. Sane, it's Martin again. I wanted to speak to Dr. Kumar's points. One about nature. sometimes when you're with other people and you're physically with someone who's much bigger or stronger than you, there's a sense that you might feel threatened by that person. But when you're out in nature, whether near the ocean or among the big oak trees or pine trees, even though they're hundreds of feet bigger than you, you're not intimidated. You kind of feel the beauty that God gave them, and you feel connected with them, and you're not threatened. So you kind of feel
Good
a
point.
natural oneness. Thank you for understanding that.
Very, very good point.
And not in every situation, there are threats in nature that you should be aware of, but in most parts, you do feel a connection with everything as you suggested.
Yeah.
And to the second point about abortion, I was actually in a debate within the U.S. Capitol in Washington, D.C. with various sides of that discussion. And I asked the question, are there more people and families and individuals willing to adopt and pay the potentially abortive mother to adopt the child that they would adopt? Yes.
Martin, I think we have to stay to the subject matter for the time being. Let's talk about comment and comment. I appreciate your comment. We'll talk about it later.
Okay. All right.
Thanks. Any other questions or comment pertaining to discussion today?
In today's topic, Shashi,
Yeah.
you mentioned that the Karma Yoga will not lead you to Gnana. Acquiring wealth is not going to lead you to Gnana. I just want to remind myself that does not mean Karma Yoga is useless.
Oh, no.
Karma Yoga is very important for Chitta Shuddhi, purification of your mind, which is an absolute essential thing before you attain the knowledge.
Oh, absolutely.
I don't want people to think that the verse is not saying Karma Yoga is useless.
No, you are so right. I'm glad you re-emphasized that point, because we spent a lot of time discussing last time. There are various ways through which you come to the base camp to climb the Mount Everest, different directions. That means talked about Karma Yoga, that means selfless service. Bhakti Marga, intense devotion that you like, Prasanna. You get Raja Marga, doing intense meditations. And when all of them are there, the mind is prepared to gain the knowledge and experience the Atman yourself. So that is really a jumping spot for every person's preparation. And that is where you get jnana. The jnana is the one which is going to move. That's a vijnana, basically, because it's going to be transformative knowledge through the experience. And that's how you jump onto it. So basically, you're exactly right. Unless a person is prepared, he cannot reach the ultimate goal. You can go to Mount Everest without preparing. Personal preparation over the last several years, reaching into the base camp through the Karma Yoga, the Bhakti Marga or Raja Marga or any other method to reach that level of understanding, then you're absolutely right. Then only you can climb the final peak. Yeah. I'm glad you emphasized it. Johnny, you have any comment?
No comment, but I have a question.
Sure.
I'm wondering about my understanding. I got the sense during the last quarter or so of your presentation that the text was basically asserting that the philosophy Advaita Vedanta was the only interpretation of the Upanishads and the Vedas. And yet, historically, there are multiple ones and multiple schools. And I've found that I didn't know what to do with that.
What you're talking about is how you reach that level of experience only by Advaita technique that we're talking about. Only one entity. But as a matter of fact, we can talk about Advaita, Dvaita, and Vishishta Advaita at a separate session. That will be perfectly fine. Because a huge subject where Arun Bhargava has been asking me questions, and I answered by simple words in the past. But I think what we need to do, and I'll discuss one complete session on that topic. I didn't mean to imply that Advaita was the only method of doing it. That was my preferred way of doing it. That's why I'm describing it the way it is.
Mhm.
But if those people who maintain through the process of Dvaita, since we're talking about, okay, go ahead. Now, Dvaita, that Dvaita is basically where Hanuman is sitting at the feet of Rama. He is an immense devotee of Rama. He recognizes that he is his servant. He recognizes divinity in Rama, but it also has the knowledge that he is divine himself too. So it's a matter of differentiating and separating in your understanding that makes Dvaita. So as Hanuman said, Deha buddhya tu dasoham. At the level of the body, I'm your servant. Like Prasanna talked about, I'm your bhakti. I'm devoted to you. Jiva buddhya tva, that's Vishishta Advaita. At the level of my sentience, like a spark of a big fire. That spark also is a part of the big fire, but seems to be appearing separately. That's Vishishta Advaita. Atma buddhyatu tvamevaham. At the level of your Atman, I'm no different than you. I'm exactly the same. That's Advaita. So it depends upon what spectrum of approach that individual wants to take is up to that individual. But even when the Hanuman was a Bhakta, he did not stay at the base camp of Bhakti Marga alone. He climbed to understand at Atma Buddhya Tvamevaham. Tvameva Aham. At the level of the soul, at the level of Atman, I'm none different than you are. So it's not a question of anybody disagreeing that Atman and Brahman are the same. It's a way as an individual how they approach the same principle. Separate as servant, Dvaita, part of the spark, what do you call fire coming out, spark coming out of it, Vishishta Dvaita, or integral part of the Atman itself, Atman Brahman. That is Advaita. So it doesn't matter what spectrum you're on. So that's how you do it. I'm sorry. I said I'll promise you, but since you're right on your band, the best thing is to answer it right now. I hope.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
Dr. Sane, just a small comment that when you think of namaskar or namaste, it's basically you're saying the spark of divinity inside you
Yeah.
honors the spark of divinity inside the other person. So that's in essence, the big fire and a spark are very much the same thing. It's just, it seems separate, but it is part of the same. So I understand that. That's very elementary, you know, for us as Hindus, I think, to say namaskar or namaste. One question I had about Achulam, the very learned scholar, he knew so many things. He had great jnana himself, but he was trying to get that next step, which is Brahmanyan. And I'm just wondering, are we all a little bit of Achulam in all of us? That's what we're really reaching for. We know our limitations. We know we've experienced a lot in the world. We've listened to Dr. Sane and so many other gurus for many years, but we're still, I mean, I won't say shortcoming, but we still have not reached that level. Are we ready for that final lesson, you would say? So how would you speak to that?
Well, I'm glad you asked that question. I was hoping somebody will ask that question. And that's why Shri Krishna has answered in two different stages. In the 71st verse, the second chapter says, gives the methodology. Vihaya kamanya sarvan, pumauscharat dispruha, nirmamo nirahankara, sashantim adhigacchati. Okay, we discussed it today. But he said, Esha, in the last verse, Esha Brahmi Sthiti Partha, Nainam Prappa Vimuyati, Sthitva Syamanta Kale Api, Brahma Nirvana. Even if at the time of your death, you're able to discard your ego and understand that fully, you can achieve it. So even the bus is taking off, you can still catch that bus if you go in the same direction and quick about it. That is how you are used to in Bombay, if you remember it. At least I used to be, you grew up in this country. Or catching a train which is moving, so you can catch it last minute. I told you other time, you go to 6th chapter, if you Purva Vyasena, if you miss that bus, you're still the first in the queue. Next time when the bus comes, you can catch that bus. So yeah, several chances. You don't have to give up on it. And it's never too late. It's enough time for everybody. And if you understanding of the last moment, that's why you do the prayers at the very end, where you get the understanding of that topic. So I don't know if I'm answering your question or not.
Yes. Thank you, Dr. Sane.